Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again. Now that I've had a chance to breathe after all my Dreamscom work, let's take a closer look at a few things I learned about while making my LucidCon 2020 scene. I wanted to include some wandering puppets so the place didn't feel completely empty, but I wasn't able to pull that off in time, so I opted for something simpler that you might be able to use to fill out spaces a little better. I'm talking about posed static puppets, so let's talk about why you might want to do this and how to do this. First of all, you're going to start with a puppet. Doesn't have to be gadget menu puppet. I use these in this scene as a stylistic choice. Any puppet that has its joint connectors intact will do. The entire reason this video exists is that the connector and hidden ray tracing costs are the number one cost in puppets, and those are what keep us from using very many in a single scene at a given time. To show you what I mean, I'm starting with my LucidCon 2020 scene, which is a very full scene to begin with at 71% gameplay and 88% graphics. And I'm going to quickly show you that it doesn't take very many puppets to overwhelm an entire arena full of stuff in cost. I'm going to make 34 copies of this puppet, giving me 36 full puppets in this scene. You will see gameplay go up 14% due to all the body parts. However, what you're missing under the hood is that puppets use raycast to traverse terrain, and we're hitting a limit there. Also, connector cost has soared from almost nothing to 66% because each standard puppet contains 18 connectors. These don't increase our limits any, but we know we're increasing computational load per frame by hazardous amounts. This is especially evident since the engine is literally dropping computation of some raycasts in order to maintain frame rate. The ultimate takeaway is that you have a limit of how many puppet-like things you can represent in a scene. Or do you? Let's talk about some tricks you might employ to squeeze a few more humanoids into a scene to make it feel fuller. The first idea I submit for your approval is using static puppets where mobile and interactive puppets aren't necessary. First example will be similar to the puppets in the intro. We just want it to sit there and be. It's just a thing to take up space and make the scene feel fuller. Imagine being in an airport terminal. There are hundreds of people in there with you that you will never talk to and never need to talk to, unless you're staring at them or watching them like a stalker. From your point of view, they'll be sitting there motionless, waiting for their flight to be called. Obviously, you want some motion to keep the whole scene from looking like a picture, but you don't need every last person to be in motion to feel convinced. So that's a good reason to do this, but all of the connectors in a puppet afford us the ability to convincingly pose them first before we delete the connectors and lower the cost. Each puppet joint has a connector, and some sculpts within the puppet act as anchors for groups of others. So neck and head and the arms are anchored to the upper torso, torso and legs are anchored to the pelvis. This is important to realize because posing a puppet works through two mechanisms, forward kinematics and inverse kinematics, or FK and IK for short. You employ FK by grabbing a body part with L2. You do the same for IK, but with R2 instead. When you move a body part with FK, that body part will move relative to the joint that body part has with its parent. In this case, we're moving the forearm relative to the elbow joint because the forearm is a child of the upper arm. Conversely, IK will move the body parts and joints between the body part being grabbed and the ultimate anchor so that the body part being grabbed can be in the place where you put it. In this case, the anchor is the upper torso and we are moving the hand, so the engine will calculate for us how the upper arm and forearm need to be oriented in order for the hand to be where it is. It's important to note that in order for that to function, the body part you're moving needs to have the possibility of actually existing in the spot, giving the other parts it's attached to. For instance, you couldn't just decide to have the hand 10 feet away with it still attached. The point of all that is you can use FK and IK in concert to get some fairly naturalistic poses. Here is a person leaning over provocatively with their hand on their hip, for instance. I'm going to quickly place this puppet into a seated pose, and I'll try to give the play-by-play so you can get a clear picture of what I'm doing. First, I will grab the pelvis with R2. That will give me an IK grab, and I will drag it down to where I want the puppet to sit. That will cause the knees to bend so that we can successfully run the legs from where the feet are to where the pelvis is. Then I'll grab the lower leg with L2 for an FK grab. That will cause the lower leg to pivot at the knee, and I'll move that back just a little so the legs aren't perfectly even. An IK grab on the foot to widen the stance a bit. People rarely sit with their legs real close together, maybe women in skirts. Then some FK grabs on the feet to pronate those. Again, people rarely sit or walk with their feet exactly straight ahead. An FK grab on each arm just to get them out of the way so I can see the torso clearly. Since I have the pelvis tilted forward, I'll try to get the puppet into a slouched position, going for a Rodin's The Thinker type of form. To do that, I will FK grab the upper torso and rotate it forward. That throws the midsection out of whack, so I need to FK rotate that as well. The parts of the standard puppet aren't exactly built for this, so we won't get the graceful curve of the spine. It'll be a little lumpy, but that's okay. If you were doing this for a scene, you'd pick a more appropriate puppet. Just FK rotated the head up to face forward so we can put a hand under the chin. Now we want to get the hands out of the couch, so we will FK rotate those up at the elbow. Then FK rotating the upper arm to bring the hand closer to the face. Remember, IK can only get you places that are possible, so if the arm is far enough behind the head, the hand won't reach the face. Once the hand is close enough, I can then IK grab it and try to maneuver it under the chin. Successful on the hand, but we're wanting the elbow to rest around the knee area. If you think about it, hand and shoulder are already aligned. The only way you're getting the elbow on the knee from here is to bring the upper torso down and everything else down with it. And that will be a series of FK rotations of the upper torso and midsection to try to get a curve going on the back. Again, it's a bit lumpy. Just now an FK rotation of the pelvis even farther forward toward the same purpose. Kind of tricky and lots of little adjustments, but I think you get the idea. Moving to the offhand, let's use an FK grab to also rotate that one out of the couch. And then an IK grab on the hand to get the hand onto a knee, and you can see how that is when that move is within the range of IK possibilities. And same thing with these IK rotations. So hopefully walking through that gave you an idea of how you might use those two grabs on a puppet and the difference between them. That's good enough. We have the puppet in position. You have options at this point. You can remove any number of connectors in the puppet with varying results. I have removed the logic at this point by deleting the puppet's microchip. With that removed, default puppet behavior like idle animation still exists, and you can keep that if you want, but it will cost you. One thing you'll want to do is set the puppet to not movable so you don't get odd behavior like this bouncing around. It turns out that you can remove the connectors from the lower body and retain the puppet idle animation. That's something you might be able to use for a static interactable character like a quest giver or a shopkeeper behind a counter, and that's a savings of 8 connectors. Any more than that and you lose the idle animation or things get detached and start looking very funky. Another option is to simply remove all of the connectors like the puppets in the beginning. They will be completely static, and the savings will be 18 connectors and the cost of the logic. Another thing you can do is make a puppet mostly static and then give some small portion of it motion with keyframes to give the illusion that it's more active than it actually is. With this puppet, I'm going to make a spectator by allowing it to retain its arm connectors. We will keyframe those and add a small amount of logic to put the arms in motion. This way you can fit more moving characters into a scene. One issue that you'll still run into is the raycast limit. That isn't a huge deal if you aren't using puppets otherwise, like in a racing game, or if you aren't using laser scopes somewhere else. However, there is a way around that by turning the puppet's collision off. In an instance like this one, where the puppet doesn't need to collide with anything because it's basically a backdrop, you can get away with that, so something to think about. This first case I'm going to do, I'll animate the head as well. This will consume 8 connectors. The scene limit for connectors is about 1,000, so theoretically you could have about 125 of these in a scene. In a little bit I'll also show you a version animating with only one arm. That takes up 3 connectors, so you'll be able to do something like 300. It's hard to say what 200 or 300 partially animated puppets would look like in a fakey crowd, but it's something to consider. I'll just place the hands above the head real quick with IK and then lower the head. As long as the animation from the default position to the final position is smooth and doesn't clip too badly, all we need to do is add a signal generator. Hooking the signal generator to the power of the keyframe will fluctuate the amount of keyframe that is applied. The result is that you're keying smoothly between the default pose and the keyframed pose. This ends up quite slow, and you can use both the keyframe and the signal generator to manipulate this, but the point is that it's animating with 2 gadgets and less than half of its joints. This is the single arm example, and I'm actually using the same puppet and the same keyframe. All I've done is remove the joints from one arm, and I'm editing the keyframe to make sure the right hand doesn't move. You can even randomize the animation by manipulating the mins and maxes in the signal generator. And if you mess with that, you end up with all sorts of possibilities. So in this video, we looked at some different ways to utilize puppets without the full puppet cost. Plenty more videos coming about things I learned while putting together my DreamsCom content. By the way, DreamsCom is streaming tomorrow, so be there. But that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you in the Dreamiverse.